Welcome to the scrappiest podcast there ever
Well,
was. I am Kim Carlos, and this is the Plus Sides. We are talking about cracking the obesity code, talking a lot about obesity and education and teaching people how to advocate for themselves,
big
having
one.
people
Yeah.
understand new treatments that are out there.
Mhm.
As for me and also Janine and Kat, we actually met or became good friends over time on TikTok, a community that is the GLP-1 TikTok community, where we talk about things like Mounjaro and we talk about Ozempic and wegovy and Saxenda and Victoza and all of these different medications that are making big differences in the lives of people who have struggled with the disease of obesity. And of course, a lot of other things too, which we'll talk about today. This episode is unboxing, or actually obesity unboxed, the connection between PCOS and ADHD, because there is a big one, and we have a special guest who'd like to talk about it. We have two very special guests. We'll introduce that in a few minutes. But first, Kat, hey,
Hey,
tell us about
I'm
you.
Kat. Well, I kind of sort of planned it on purpose. Just want to say that my T-shirt matches my
Prince,
poster.
Prince, yes.
Forever.
Oh my
Prince
Kat.
forever.
The funny thing is, too, I think it's because I am so excited. Oh, nerd moment. I'm going to France in June. I'm going to
Woo!
Nice. And the one of the reasons why when I was a little girl and I saw this movie Under the Cherry Moon, it was in Nice, France. I'm going to the Mary Sharon house. I can't wait. And only Prince nerds understand that right now.
Yes.
You're going to
Poor
the Mary
Janine's like,
Sharon house. Cut it, look, you just cat stuff. Anyway, so I can't wait. But
awesome.
that's me in a nutshell. I'm a nut bar. You can find me on TikTok at CatCarter7.
That's awesome. And if you want to look into our stories or listen to our stories a little bit deeper about the things that we go through and what we struggle with, you can go listen to 1, 2, and 3 of the podcast, the first season or the first episodes. Hey
Yeah.
Janine, how's it going?
Hey.
So glad you're
How
here.
ah, I'm always so glad to be here. Thank you all. Sorry I sound a little hoarse tonight, but
It's
I am
okay.
so happy to be here and I can't wait for our guest. I'm like
We've got
I'm,
some good ones.
So
I'm
excited.
kind of like uber stoked about it.
Awesome. Well, so one of the reasons we started the podcast is that the media had taken a lot of our testimonies that we were talking about how these medications had changed our lives and so many things that we have struggled with
Yeah.
our entire lives, and they had taken it and just diminished it and called us trends, and even like putting blurs over our videos or taking out the sound or interviewing some of us and then not actually giving the full story and leaving out
Oh yeah.
information. There was
Mhm.
misinformation, wrong information. It was just like a pile of crap. And I just got to the point where I reached out to people to say, "Hey, are you sick of this too?" Right? And I just didn't think it was right for them to take our stories and take away our voices. And so this is an opportunity for us to get loud and to take our voices back. So one of our guests that we're going to have on today is someone from our community, and her name is Rachel. She's
Yay.
near and dear to my heart.
Yay.
She's one of the first people that I ever like had moments with where I realized that food doesn't have moral worth and all these different things that made me very emotional talking about it. So I'm going to move on and just introduce her and let her tell you her story. And I am going to invite her in now.
All
Yay, it's Rachel.
right.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
I'm so glad to hi. I'm sorry for being all
Friend
weepy.
of the community.
Friend of the
You
community.
can weep. It's okay.
It's okay. We're very similar. We
I
understand.
bring people to tears for many reasons. So
Same.
That's awesome.
Woo.
Well, this is for sure the floor for you. This is unfiltered, uncut, your moment to tell your story. It's very powerful.
Mhm.
And we'd like to hear everything from, beginning to where you are now and how things have changed and improved for you. And even maybe how they haven't, like we'd like to hear it all.
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. So my name is Rachel, and I have fought the disease of obesity since I was 8 years old. And, that's not something that I think any of us really realize, until recently, that obesity is a disease. And, I just forever blamed myself for all of the reasons that society tells us that people with
Mhm.
weight issues, it's their fault. They make you feel like um, it's something that is tied to your work ethic. It's tied to your morals, and that if you can't control the size of your body, that it has direct ties to your moral worth. And, that's just not true.
Yep.
But when you grow up in a larger body, from the age of 8, you don't understand that. And I literally hated myself my entire life because I just felt like I should be able to control the size of my body because other people can. So why can't I? Hang on.
I think all of us, we really mirror
Yeah.
that. Like we feel
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's no way that I would have understood any of it. And people could have told me that it's a disease. But without taking this medication, I don't know that I would have believed them.
Yeah.
Because I think it is so powerful that I'm taking a medication that I've had binge eating disorder also since I was 8 years old. And the medication shuts it off. It flips it off like a switch for me. And so I've wrestled with this so much in my head. There's no way. How was I going to do that by myself? How was I going to do that without a medication? How is it possible that this disorder that I have is not tied to these hormones that the medication affects? I'm a very logical thinking person. I do have ADHD, and so I overthink a lot, which is a blessing and a curse all at the same time.
Guilty.
But right. And so I just don't think that I would have believed it. And so I've thought about all of the scientific connections, all of the medical connections, and it has set me free. And it really has been total freedom for me in just knowing that it was not my fault. And it's so much more than somebody saying it's not your fault. It's that taking a medication shuts it off.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't my fault. It's my physiology, my actual body and how it processes things. In addition, for me, it's my brain and my body. I have ADHD, I have binge eating disorder, but I also have PCOS, insulin resistance, and the disease of obesity. And so all of them in concert together, resulted in me weighing 315 pounds for a very long time in my adulthood. I've always been in a larger body. But, I tried so hard to lose weight. And I did lose weight many times. And inevitably, it always came right back. And so, yeah, I think the biggest thing for me with these medications is just total freedom. Freedom from hating myself. And if I didn't lose another pound, I would still advocate for these medications, and I would still, I assume that I will be on some type of medication like this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it is the brain change that I want. Now I want the less insulin resistance. I want less inflammation. I used to carry so much fluid in my body that it was hard for me to breathe. And this medication, people think that it's just the weight loss that's helping all these other things. But I can tell you that if I go 10 days between shots, it's right back.
Yeah.
The water weight and the inflammation is immediately back. And it has zero to do with my weight. And it went away just as quickly when I started this medication before I lost a significant amount of weight. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important for people to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is too.
Very
I'm
important.
one of the coolest things I feel like, and this is sort of like personal, but like in a moment where I had a really bad day. God, I hate when I get emotional on these things. I had a
Aw.
really bad day because I felt like I had made a lot of bad food choices. And I actually, like, I look back on it, it really wasn't that bad. And I reached out to you and you said, I think that like in this moment, like just recognize there really are no good foods or bad foods. They're just foods.
Yeah.
Like don't make them have power of good or bad. And then of course that
Hmm.
equates to you being good or bad. And like
Right.
in that moment, I really needed to hear that. Like, and that changed everything for me. Everything for me. Because I was like, oh my God, I'm not horrible. I'm not fat and lazy. I'm not all of these things. And for me, like the medication, very similar than like with you, it turned off that food noise like a switch, and then it seemed like everything changed from there. So I can completely relate to what you're talking about. In terms of like things with PCOS and with your cycle, if you feel comfortable explaining any of that, because there's so many listeners that I know struggle with this or know or love someone that does,
Yeah.
can you explain a little bit about that and how this has helped you in that area? Like
And
in
I
what
think,
ways?
yeah, I think too, a lot of people have PCOS and they do not know it.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of doctors, we have some good ones too.
Yeah, we
But a
do.
lot of doctors don't worry about it until you're trying to get pregnant
Yeah.
and they don't
Yes.
even discuss what's going on. And I'm, the PCOS part of it, a lot of people with PCOS have insulin resistance,
Yeah.
which just means that your body is resistant to using, the insulin that it produces. Insulin is what breaks down sugar and glucose. And, um, you know, a lot of people who are diabetic are insulin resistant too. But a lot of people who aren't are as well. And they don't realize that
Yeah.
all of those things are so closely, you know, maybe not linked, but so similar. And we all have a lot of the same symptoms. And the biggest one for a lot of people is cycle. So my cycle just never stopped when
Ooh.
I was young. So I just bled forever, basically.
Wow.
So that's what sent me to the doctor because
It
my
sounds
mom was like, this
exhausting.
is not right.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
weird and not supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
But I had read an
Yeah.
article in 17 magazine about PCOS. Now, this was a while ago, before the
Yeah.
internet or when the internet was a baby.
Yeah.
And so I told my doctor about it, and he didn't know what PCOS was. He didn't know what it
Wow.
was. This was, I don't know, I'd have to count the years, but in the 90s.
90s. Yeah.
And so many people have it. And it's
Yeah.
just wild to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, Janine had said that in her story before that people just didn't talk about that and that she didn't even realize that it was a thing until she started like seeing things like hairs on her face and things like
Yeah.
that. And because no one talked about it,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
And that's what we're doing here, right? We're talking about
right.
it.
I'm talking about
And
it.
it's such an embarrassing thing for so many girls. Like my friends pointed out long black hairs on my neck right here. I didn't know I
Yeah.
had them. Who's looking at their neck when they're,
Yeah.
12 years old, 13 years old?
Yeah.
Right.
And it was mortifying. And I was just beside myself. I was already a very shy person.
Yeah.
And so I just, I, it, so funny, like, and it was a lot by the time I was an adult. Shaving twice a day or plucking daily, hours and hours spent on trying to get rid of facial hair.
Oh
And that
no.
is such a painful point for so many people. I will
Yeah.
say that it's extremely diminished taking GLP-1 medications
That's so
because it's all
great.
tied to
Great.
hormones.
Good.
Yeah.
But
That's
so many
awesome.
girls out there are dealing with that, and they feel so shamed because of it,
Yeah.
and it's just really sad
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
Speaking of shame, that made me think of the only time when I was tested or they approached PCOS to me is when we were trying to have a baby. Long story short, that didn't happen. It's cool. It's cool.
Mhm.
But the doctors were like really, they were kind of rude. They're like, well, because of your size, we have to test you for PCOS. Because of your size, we have to test you for this or for whatever. And it made me feel so ashamed to be tested
Mm.
for PCOS when it's
Yeah.
not really.
Yeah.
It's just
I've
anything to be ashamed
all
of.
sizes of people of women have PCOS, but
Yeah.
yeah, that just.
All sizes.
I
Yeah.
was just telling my husband, I was like, it's just another thing that I'm ashamed of because of my size. It's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
the size. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure if this happened to you all, but I think, back in the day, the like go to like cure all was the birth control pill. It was like, oh
Yeah.
well, we'll just
Let's
put you
just
on the
put you on
pill.
there, birth control pill. Yeah.
And that caused so many other issues because our hormones were already out of balance.
Yeah.
They
No
yeah.
one no one said anything about PCOS to me until maybe 2 years ago. I'm 50.
Wow.
Not until I was 48 years old. Now when I look back, it's like you're almost piecing your medical history together.
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, wait a minute. It was probably this."
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true, and I do find that happens a lot, and, like, even when I hear about people with ADHD, I'm like, "I wonder if that's something that I had going on," and that maybe that contributed to my binge eating. So, in the first episode, I
Mhm.
talk about how I started binge eating when I was 8 years old. My parents had gone through a divorce, my mom had remarried. I have a wonderful, wonderful dad, but and he raised me, and it's great. But at the same
Yeah.
time, those were a lot of really big feelings I did not know how to deal with, and I didn't want to burden anybody with. And all of that sort of just turned into me going to food to feel better. And it
Mm.
kind of never stopped until recently, until July when I started a GLP-1,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and but the binge eating, that's another thing. It's like a lot of shame, right, involved in that. And I think what's so sort of cool about these medicines is being able to like kind of address when you have these feelings and being able to make a different choice. And like I felt like before them I couldn't do that. Like I couldn't be like, do I really want this? Because I don't think, do I? And my body go, you really don't. Like you're just kind of thinking about the memory of it. You don't necessarily really want to eat that. You're just thinking about how it made you feel, you know? And then I was
Mhm.
like, oh crap, I really don't want it. But before that, I couldn't do that. It wasn't, those connections in my brain just didn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
Rachel, what about with you, with the binge eating? I know we have a lot of people in our community
Yeah.
that struggle with it. How did you cope with that, or how did that come about for you?
So I definitely want to say, because so many people do not know, that there's a direct correlation between ADHD and binge eating disorder. And I think
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
so many people see that in my posts or live, and they are just blown away, just like I was. And it all just kind of like came full circle for me when I figured out ADHD is a dopamine deficiency. And when you're trying to get dopamine, which is the good feeling chemicals, things that
Hmm.
the chemicals in your brain that make you feel good.
Mhm.
Um, when I was 8 years old, I didn't have a lot of ways to get that. And so food was the obvious choice. And so when your brain learns that it can get dopamine from food, it's just for so many people, it kind of triggers BED. And when I understood just that simple science of it,
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
of course, of
of
course,
course. Yeah,
of course,
Yeah.
right? And this medication is helping that. Somehow this medication is affecting the reward centers of the brain
yeah,
somehow. you
Right.
Mhm.
know um there are people who are are beating addictions and alcoholism, and
yeah.
that is all tied to the
Yeah.
reward centers of your brain as well.
Yes.
And it is wild to me that
Mhm.
the media is not just all over this
Yes.
story. Do we not
It's so
want
much better, right?
Because it's obesity, and that's
Yes.
the moral
Right.
failing. That
Right.
is you
Yeah.
know what, just
Yeah.
eat right and move more,
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
works for
say
everybody because
you have
clearly all
failed at
bodies are
life.
the
Yeah.
same. Yeah.
So now you have this connotation connected to it, but yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll come around, but that I
Yeah.
think is the resistance, the cause of it.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, I think that, and I hope so. Like, I hope so, Kat. Like, this is a big thing to overcome, and that's what we're all trying to be a part of, you know. But
Yeah.
like, I do. It kills me sometimes when I think to myself, if they actually did their job, and they research these medications and the benefits that they're providing and the data upon data that's out there to support it, like scientific data for years, you
Yeah.
know, if they would look at that, that is so much better and so much better story than the sensational shit that they spin. Like it really is. Like it blows my mind that they wouldn't actually just go, you're missing the point. It's right here, you know?
I've been screaming it for months.
Yes.
I
We're
just don't
screaming it
understand.
here.
You all are missing the point.
You're
Like, I don't
missing
get it. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
I
is
don't either.
wild to me.
Yeah, like when I saw a doctor go on one of these news programs, they were morning shows, but one of these news programs and said, and literally listed Ozempic face as a side effect.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
about fell out. That is incredibly irresponsible. And so that's the thing is like, this is so typical, right? This is why we all love TikTok so much, right? There's not people telling us and policing us and saying that we like can't say what we feel and what we think and things that are real and true. So we have like our own kind of set of communication and stories and
We have
things
our
that
own
people, and
community.
again,
Yeah.
they're just missing the point. Why don't they just get on TikTok? I don't know.
It is sensational enough. Like, this is
Yes,
sensational.
it is
What?
sensational. I know, it's
Like, I don't
amazing.
get it.
Yeah, I don't
My
know.
dad was an addict. He
Yeah.
was a type 2 diabetic. And I think all the time, what if some doctor had just decided to give him a GLP-1?
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was a binger. My mom, that's
Yeah.
that's episode
That's
2. My mom
we're
was
gonna
a
have a whole episode about your mom.
real character. But my dad was a
Yeah.
binger, but my mother, she would find a fault and be a real jerk about it. So she would be like, your father's got bags and bags of empty candy bars in the car every GD day and my dad was
Yeah.
binging. I was like, well, shoot, he needed a release.
Yeah.
He
Right.
needed
Totally.
an escape, but I really do think it probably is hereditary. My dad was a
Yeah.
binger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, ADHD, I'm pretty sure is
Yeah.
hereditary. And
Yeah.
so it really is all like, all these things are so enmeshed and
Yeah.
tied. You can't, it's
Connected.
almost like you
Yeah.
can't say one causes the other, because you could say the other causes this one.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. And
Yeah. And I've had those like additional benefits as well, Rachel, like you, like outside, of the core reason to take the medicine, right, is to treat the
Yeah.
obesity because there's so many things that are related to the obesity. And so like I honestly can say, and I still have a lot of weight to lose. I still have a lot of weight to lose in terms of like getting to what's considered not like how I feel comfortable in my body, but
You have
just
a
to
lot
like
of
a good
fun in
healthy
front of
place.
you.
Yeah, that's what it is. And
Mhm.
but for me, if I didn't lose another pound, and it was safe, I would take this medicine forever because it's made that big of a difference in my mental health, my reduction of obsessive thoughts, my reduction of complete anxiety, out of control, self-doubt, all of these different things. I just don't have it anymore. It's like this. And so
Yeah.
to me, that, and just like you said, Rachel, like I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't taken the medicine, right? Because that's the magic of it. Like all the bullshit they talk about, and it doesn't melt your fat or anything like that. But the magic of it is what it does to your brain. And you said it perfect. It frees it, right? It frees it. And then you can make these decisions and these choices and have these feelings and it's okay. And you forgive yourself. Like it's a process, but man, it feels great to be on the road. Don't you think?
And I think too, like somebody in a comment section once where I'm constantly trying to,
I know you are.
if there's misinformation, I'm probably there, type in.
Totes.
But I said it was freeing. And
Yeah.
someone said, just listen to yourself. Like the amount of shame they want to place on you for taking a medication instead of just white knuckling it like we've
Yeah.
all tried to do our entire lives,
People our
pretty
entire
much.
lives, and there's such a
Um,
shame. Yeah.
yeah, there's so
You're
much
afraid to talk to
shame.
your doctor because
And I
you're
was
Yeah.
like,
ashamed of
listen,
yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
listen to me. What do you mean? I'm free. You don't
Yeah.
understand. If you are not obese, have BED, then you don't
Yeah.
understand. You
At
can't
all.
Yes.
possibly
You
understand
can't
why in
No,
the
possibly.
we
world
can't.
are you shaming people for taking medication to treat disease and disorder. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't
I
understand.
I know there was one doctor that I saw that was running around TikTok, and he's like in, I want to say he was in Ireland. I want to say. And he said, well, of course they're upset that they can't get their medicine. They haven't been treated and everybody's telling it's their fault all the time, And
Mhm.
of course they feel like that. This is actually changing things for them. And I was like, that's exactly what it is. Like, but I think the perception is out there that we are, and that those who are obese, we are fat, we are lazy,
Lazy.
we are taking medicine from people where they're more deserving because of their disease and all these different things. But what they don't realize is 80% of type 2 diabetics suffer from obesity.
Mhm.
Like, it's a major problem. We have way more alike than we do not. And I hate that they stigmatize things like this because
Yeah.
they're related, and that's the reason that we're like leveraging these medications and being able to have success with them. And I'm just so tired of the spin out there that and there's these medications, like you said, they've been used to treat so many other things than just a symptom of obesity, right? Which would be like just the weight, right? It's not just the weight. So
Right.
I really hope that we can change things, because I don't like that perception, because it's not true. Like, it's just not
No.
true,
And
you know?
society is going to hold on to that narrative as long as they can
Yeah.
Because
because
it's been
it's
so
not
easy.
really a conscious bias, I don't think,
Yeah.
but it's an
Yeah.
unconscious bias where they have been told that if you are living in a larger body, it is your fault, and
Yeah.
it is because of your own personal failing,
Yeah.
and they can't separate
Yeah.
that from the now science that
Yeah.
tells us it's not true. Okay,
Yeah.
we've
Mhm.
thought it forever, but guess what? It's not true. So
Yeah.
when does society get told you
Yeah.
don't get to say this shit anymore,
Yeah,
right?
totally, right.
You don't get to say this shit anymore because you
Yeah.
wouldn't tell somebody with rheumatoid arthritis not to take their medication.
Right. Or somebody with depression not to take theirs. Like, when did that
Exactly.
switch happen? Like,
Exactly.
at
Mhm.
some point, that switch did happen where people weren't like, "Get over it, feel better, like,
Right.
brighten up, like, shake it off." Like, people
Right.
quit doing that. They were like, "Oh, like, go see a doctor and get on some medicine." But for this, they haven't quite gotten there
Mhm.
yet. So I'm hoping like we're on the path, but
We for sure are. I
I
mean,
hope so.
things are changing.
Things are
Things
moving.
are
They're moving pretty
changing.
quick, I think, too, since the launch of Mounjaro, that's for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's moving and shaking in social media.
We're amazed,
Yeah,
and that's why
we're
people are
amazed.
so loud. People
Yeah,
think that we're getting paid by Manjaro. Manjaro's
yeah,
not paying me anything.
Mm-mm.
I
no,
am amazed. My life
yeah,
has changed. I've
yeah,
struggled my entire life, all 40 years,
yeah.
and if you don't know the struggle, I am so happy you don't.
I'm so happy
I
too.
am so
Yeah.
happy you don't.
But they
But
probably know someone that does, right?
yeah,
Like, I mean, if they don't know it, great, but they
yeah,
probably love someone or know
they
someone
probably
that
do.
does.
Mhm.
But they probably thought that they were somehow superior to that
Yes.
person their
Yes.
entire lives
Yes.
because that is what society has taught them.
You hit it on
Yeah.
the
And it's
nose.
not, I don't think people are walking around like I'm better than fat people. Fat people can't be, it's
Yeah.
not a, it's
It's a
not a like,
subconscious thing.
it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
subconscious bias, which we
Yes.
see all over in many different areas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But this is one that's hanging on for a long time because
Yeah.
they feel like they can blame us for it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think also when you
Not
said
for
like we're
long.
all being very loud about this, and we're finding our voices. I know from my perspective and my story, and I am such an extrovert, but I really did shrink all of my life because of the shame, right?
Mm.
And I was quiet about it. I didn't like people talking about my weight. I obviously carried it. And I don't know if you haven't seen my previous stories, but I've always been into fitness, ran, weights, everything. So, and yeah, the shrinking that I would do. And I'm not shrinking anymore. And that
Yeah.
it's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
No more
shrank.
of that. No more of
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. No.
No more making ourselves small to make other
No.
feels big, right? Like it's not
It's the
it's
irony
not
of it.
not
Yeah.
a thing. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
Rachel, thank you. We hope that you will stay on with
I
us.
loved
We
it.
appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you,
But we do
Rachel.
have a special guest. So, for those that are in our community, our guest doesn't need a lot of introduction. So, I'm just going to call her Dr. Myra, and we're going to have her come on and talk about herself. And we have a lot of questions for her that I know everybody has been dying to know. So, here she comes.
Here she
Hello.
Dr. Myra,
Hey,
it's so good
Dr.
to have
Myra.
you.
Hey, Dr.
Thanks for
Myra.
having me. I appreciate it.
Love
Yeah,
your
we're so
lives. I
excited
love
to
your
have you
content.
here.
Oh,
So I wanted to start just a little bit with you. If you could tell us a little bit about like what you do. I mean, you don't have to go into your credentials and things like that, but we obviously know you're on TikTok quite a bit. But
Yeah,
your
yep.
company and things like that and what you're passionate about, and then we can go from there.
sure. I'm Myra. You should just call me Myra. We're going to keep it casual. But I run Join Mochi, which is a telehealth obesity medicine practice. And the goal is really to do comprehensive non-surgical bariatric care. So everything from medication-based approaches to nutrition-based therapies to fitness coaching in one model. So
Awesome.
yeah.
And what made you feel like that was an area you wanted to go and a company you wanted to start?
Yeah. I was initially really interested in vascular and thoracic surgery, which is a very different space, but then I ended up doing a research project I did this thesis on basically bariatric management and outcomes and the laparoscopic revolution that we've seen, which is that a lot of bariatric surgery pre 2000s or early 2000s used to be big open surgical approaches, and then it became laparoscopic, endoscopic, balloon, a whole bunch of other things. And there was also this explosion around medication-based management, both preoperatively and postoperatively, so much so that many patients never actually get bariatric surgery. They go to bariatric surgery centers as a referral from primary care and end up going through medication-based and lifestyle management approaches. And then I was working through this whole project and talked to my thesis advisor, like, why does this not exist? I was in Washington. The area had like 5 million people, and there were 3 of these centers, and they each had a 2-year-long wait list, and nobody knew that these things existed. Like everybody I talked to was looking for supplements, looking for berberine, looking for any kind of number of things to try to help with this, and none of them were evidence-based FDA-approved medications because they didn't know that it existed. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, that's so cool. It's so nice
Yeah.
when you like can
Found you a great
do something
niche.
you're into
Yeah.
and then like it sort of spins off into like something you're even more passionate about and you're solving even bigger problems. So
Yeah.
you're not basic. That's okay.
Okay.
Kat, I think you had a question.
Oh, was it my? Sorry,
Yeah.
I got so excited. I was like, "Yeah, it's Myra." Okay. So you heard about Rachel's story about struggling with childhood obesity,
Yeah.
PCOS, ADHD. How are GLP-1s helping to alleviate those PCOS symptoms?
Yeah. I think that there's a number of different ways that GLP-1 medications work for PCOS. I made a video on this a while ago, but there's the initial benefit of helping with weight loss. And of course, weight and fat cells are a hormone producing type of cell. And so just in that effect alone, it can oftentimes help with a lot of the insulin resistance and symptoms of hyperandrogenism that PCOS patients have. PCOS is interesting though, because there's been a lot of research into specifically how GLP-1s can also be help to resume ovulation, help on ultrasound to reduce ovarian follicle size, help with restoring fertility in a lot of patients. So there's a lot of hand waving happening with like specifically
Wow.
why GLP-1s outside of weight loss can help. But yeah, a lot of different
That's
mechanisms.
incredible. And
Wow.
and going into like say ADHD, would that also make that hormonal connection as well with the
Yeah, I think
GLP-1?
ADHD is a little different. There's
Mm-hmm.
a number of addictive pathways that GLP-1s also work on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what Rachel said is true, right? In the dopaminergic pathways of
Yeah.
using food as a reward system, GLP-1s can also help with those. So they've been seen to help with alcohol addictions, help with smoking, help with shopping addiction, help with a lot of patients after bariatric surgery end up with things called transfer addiction, which is that they transfer their addictions from food
I've
to
heard
other
that. Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
being on GLP-1s can be really helpful with that to suppress those cravings. So,
That's great.
Wow.
yeah.
I wanted to kind of expand. I'm going to be selfish for a moment because this is what I went through. So I tried Contrave a couple of years ago. And while I felt somewhat of a shift, Contrave like twisted up my insides like a pretzel. Like the abdominal pain and cramps were terrible. And it turned my menstrual cramps into like I had to be off work, vomiting. They were really violent.
Yeah.
And then I stopped taking it, but I would still occasionally have that abdominal pain. Doctors had me do a saline ultrasound, couldn't find anything. Colonoscopy, you're fine. But I've noticed since taking the Manjaro, because that after I stopped taking the Contrave, it would still kind of surface every couple of months. I'd have those twisty cramps. But ever since taking the Manjaro, I have not had the big bad monster hit. And so,
Yeah.
my doctor and I are thinking that maybe was it hormonal causing my insides to just be ravaged?
Yeah.
Is there a way that Contrave does that to your hormones or
As far
no?
as I know, Contrave isn't really working on the same hormonal pathways. So Contrave is a
Yeah.
combination of bupropion and naltrexone,
Hmm.
bupropion being an atypical antidepressant and naltrexone being a medication that's usually used for all kinds of different addictions, most commonly used for smoking cessation.
Oh,
But it can also be used for obesity in combination with bupropion. I don't think it has the side effect of doing anything to your insides or altering hormones. Mostly it's working through craving reward pathways. So,
very
Oh, wow.
interesting. Got
yeah.
to find some things to get where we are. So
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Well, Dr. Myra, thank you. I'm fanning out a little bit too,
No.
because because your videos have gone viral and people share them, and it is increasing the education, awareness, and advocacy for for all of us. So I just have to say thank you for that. But my question, as the resident type 2 diabetic, because I'm horm- hormonally dispositioned for it, diabetes runs
Mhm.
in my family, and also with me being African American, I'm a little bit more susceptible to it. But my question to you is, and we hear these terms so much, but what do they really mean? So if you could just tell us the difference between type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and metabolic disorder diagnosis.
Sure. I would think of your pancreatic function as a spectrum. And your pancreas is responsible for producing insulin and also has all kinds of receptors that your cells use to say, hey, there's sugar in the bloodstream, use that as a source of energy. In general, there's like two pathways that you can use for energy. You can use sugars coming in that you are eating, or you can use all other types of stored forms of energy. So you can use ketones if you're this is what keto is using ketones as energy. You can use proteins as energy. You can use fats as energy. You can convert other things to sugars to use as energy, a whole bunch of other things. But generally speaking, do you want to use energy now or do you want to use stored energy? Your pancreas has beta cells, which are responsible for producing insulin and responding to blood sugar. And when you end up with high levels of sugar constantly circulating, some of these start to go haywire. And the initial pieces of a couple of beta cells going haywire is insulin resistance or metabolic disorders, which is that you have a couple of them that are a little off, but if you're able to get your blood sugars under control and you're able to reset this with either medication-based or lifestyle-based or both, you can kind of get back to normal, right? So insulin resistance in that phase, this is like pre-diabetic as well. All of these things are considered a phase where your pancreas has enough function that it can be restored. Type 2 diabetes is when enough of your blood sugar has been chronically elevated for long enough that enough pancreatic beta cells are out. And you now have just kind of diminished ability to tell what source you want to be using for sugars. Do you want to be using the sugars coming in, or do you want to be using the sugars from storage? And your body's kind of bad at that now because these cells aren't responding appropriately. So sometimes it's going to use fat cells for converting back to energy, even though there's tons of sugar in your bloodstream. And sometimes it's going to be using other storage forms for energy. This is still reversible, right? So some type 2 diabetics that are just barely diagnosed will end up coming back out with lifestyle and medication management to the point where they're normalizing A1C levels, which is the average of your blood sugar over a couple months. Other times, if you have gone way, way, way over and you are not diagnosed as diabetic until you have very little pancreatic beta cell function left, that's considered much harder to reverse all the way back down. And most likely you'll need to be on medication long term. So I would think of it as like as a function of how many of your pancreatic beta cells are still working and how many of them can still be recovered.
Wow. I have never heard that explained like that.
Broke it down so like awesome.
Yeah. And now it makes so much sense, especially I'm seeing more conversations about the pancreas and GLP-1s and how insulin is so important to everyone. It isn't just important to diabetics, but it's really like the conduit almost to letting your body know what to do. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah. So everybody has a pancreas and everybody has insulin. Type 1 diabetics are not responding to any amount of insulin, and so that they require insulin. They're not producing insulin, so they require insulin to be given to get that response.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'll end up with way too high blood sugar. Type 2 diabetics have just a spectrum of function of their pancreas. So I will say that your pancreas function is basically there's always improvements that you can make. Right. So even if you were diagnosed at the very end of A1C of 10 plus, you can always make a lot of improvement and prevent the other complications of just having diabetes and having chronically high blood sugar in your bloodstream. So,
okay. Well, great. Well, I have a second question since we're on this train. So why do we treat type 2 diabetes and obesity in similar ways now with GLP-1 medications? And do you think these medications might eventually replace surgery?
I think this is two different questions.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I think the GLP-1 medications are not unique in that they are being used to treat obesity. So SGLT2 is another class of obesity is another class of diabetes medication that is also helpful with weight loss. Metformin was one of the older ones. Plus minus how much weight loss it helps with, but it was also considered that if you're able to help with some of this insulin resistance and controlling blood sugars, you will also help with weight loss. I think the general principle for a lot of these is the same, is that medications that can help reduce this insulin resistance can help with weight loss. GLP-1s are just unique in that they also have this other mechanism of altering the rate that your stomach is emptying into your intestines and making you feel full for longer and helping on all of these brain signaling pathways that they're also very helpful for obesity. So,
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
The second question you had was, do I think they're going to replace surgery?
Yes.
And I think they're not. I don't know if they're there yet. I think that we will see a massive reduction in the number of patients going for surgery. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done for people who are BMI 50, 60 plus to be using these before surgery or using these after surgery. I don't know. I don't think there's enough out there yet to know if it's going to get rid of surgery completely. There's always going to be a use case for surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been learning actually quite a lot about that in the podcast, learning
Yeah.
about the different kinds of bariatric, and even like that there are pediatric bariatric surgeons.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have some questions. Okay. So I know, so one of my favorite things about you is that I love, and it's probably because I'm a marketer, I love how you back things up with data. You're like, no, this is what the data shows. Let's look at the data. And it's like one of my favorite things. And one of the things that I've heard you say before is GLP-1s are not a new class. Like Mounjaro is, in that it's an evolution, right? But it's not new. We've got like 20 years of data, of study data on this. Like we know how these things work. Like they all work a little bit different. But I wanted to know a little bit more about that, because I feel like the media and everywhere, they're always spinning about how these things are so new, you know? But I want to know more about like the data behind that, and how you see that transitioning going forward for people that are struggling with obesity, knowing that it's chronic. You know, what does it look like with maintenance? What does it look like when you get to a weight that's healthy? And how do you use these medications? You know, I think there's a lot of kind of debate and opinions trying to figure out what that best practice is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have been around for, I think it was like 2005 that the first GLP-1s were approved. And so they have been around for decades, and they've been used very widely for decades. The evidence that we have for obesity only, for patients using them off, or I guess on label now for obesity, is much more limited. Theoretically, all the side effects, all of the long-term complications, all of the long-term impact of being on any medication for 10 years is going to be very similar for people who are using it for type 2 diabetes and for obesity. But we also just haven't seen the same kind of scale for wegovy, which is, I think, where a lot of this nervousness comes from people. So right now, there's like hundreds of thousands of people getting on wegovy and getting on Ozempic and getting on Mounjaro, and it's just a new, it's becoming more normalized to be on obesity medication. I think that's kind of scary for a lot of the media.
Yeah.
That being said, there's so many meta-analyses around people being on GLP-1s for 5+ years, and what their A1C looks like, and what their comorbidities look like, and all of that. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, that's
in terms
really
of
good.
maintenance on these medications, there's actually very limited information on what maintenance is going to look like long term for people using it only for obesity. Most of the focus has been on how can we control A1Cs and insulin resistance for type 2 diabetics on these medications long term, and not on how can we make sure that the patient is able to maintain the same weight. So
Yeah. That's one thing I've said too for myself, is I'm like, I may always be on something like this, but there may be something else that they come up with in 5 years that replaces this, that isn't the same thing, you know? So I'm just sort of like on the train of, that's a job for future Kim to worry about. Right now, I'm just worrying about this, you know? So but I just wanted to ask, because I feel like a lot of people are curious, like, what are we going to do next? And what does this look like? And it happens a lot in our community. So thanks for answering that. The other question I wanted to ask you is, because you like to talk a lot about studies and data, and I love that, is the Surmount 2 study that just came out. So I'm really curious kind of about really what your position is on that. I know you've done a TikTok on it, but obviously not everybody listening or watching may not follow you. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is? And of course, like what you think that may end up doing in terms of how insurance will start treating these medications and covering them?
Yeah, so basically the Surmount 2 trial is the second of 5 trials that Eli Lilly is doing for Mounjaro. In order to get any medication approved by the FDA for a certain indication, you need 2 large-scale phase 3 clinical trials to be submitted. I'm sorry, I have a 10-week-old kitten, and it is losing its mind.
That's okay. We're animal lovers.
Yes.
Okay. The goal with Surmount 2 is basically to prove that it is useful for obesity and for type 2 diabetes. I think you need both Surmount 1 and Surmount 2 results to be finalized, and for the FDA to review them before any decision can happen by the FDA. I think it's unlikely that the FDA will approve it for obesity before the fall. From the data from Surmount 2, It looks like it is a better drug than Ozempic or Wegovy. But I think it is also going to be really hard to get coverage for these medications. Before FDA approves it, like I'm thinking very, very limited coverage.
Yeah.
After FDA approves it for obesity, I think all the plans that have Wegovy will add it. And I think some plans slowly will continue to add it. I think the biggest barrier is going to be CMS adding it. Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services has a carve out for 2 different classes of medication. Infertility treatments and obesity medications are specifically, it's written in there that you cannot cover these under any circumstances because it's considered cosmetic and the government won't pay for it. There was an interesting New England Medicine piece on this, which basically said that the break-even point for government to cover this is at $300 a month. And at $300 a month, it makes sense for government to be willing to pay for all of the obesity medication rather than pay for the comorbidities that will happen later. So
yeah. I'm super curious what that like. I had heard that there was some data on that, on like how much money we could technically save from a government perspective if we treat it
and
now.
it's also partially because the health insurances only think of health insurances treat patients as customers that will only last for 3 to 4 years. So they're only looking at what's going to happen to people in 3 to 4 years because that's how long people are on the average insurance plan.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and diabetes takes longer than 3 to 4 years to develop. And so for a lot of these insurance companies, it's like, this is not our problem, which is terrible. It's a complete.
Wow.
Well, they're just going to get the next person.
Wow.
Like that's the, like, if you look at the numbers, like they're just going to, whatever guy's transferring off of you for now, you're just going to get the next guy that's got the same problem from the other insurance. So you might as well work together with guys.
And it makes sense, right? All insurances should really be covering this, but it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
I think it'll take a while too. It does seem like there are a lot of new things brewing. Like, and I don't know, like when I look at like the things that are out there and like where we've come in with Mounjaro, from Ozempic, from Wegovy, from where we were with Trulicity, like from friggin' metformin, like it seems like we're just continuing to perfect and refine this class of medications to better treat lots of different things.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got somewhat of a controversial question for you. It's all a buzz in the world, and you know, it's compounding with the shortages and the demand and people fighting in the streets, fires and setting cars on fire. Okay, that was just me, but and the FDA saying that you can no longer compound eventually. What are your thoughts on compounding?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
And
finish.
Yeah,
no,
actually,
go ahead.
No, I'm ready.
You go.
What are your thoughts on compounding?
Yeah. Okay. I think I want to start by like talking about what compounding is and what is it used for and where does it come from.
Yes.
So compounding is like a very old practice of basically custom formulations of medications for patients. It was traditionally done for removing dyes for certain medications, switching to different fillers, using different bases based on allergies, based on specific patient recommendations, customizing dosing. And it is a very old practice of pharmacy. I think today, the way that we get generic medication is it comes from India or China as a supplier. It comes to your CVS pharmacy. It gets pre-filled into vials and it gets dispensed out to patients. And this whole practice of compounding really went away because of efficiency. A lot of the medications that we have today that are generics that are being dispensed are also coming from internationally. The controversy of compounding really came up in 2005 when there was this huge scandal of injectable medication that was contaminated. And at that time, the FDA had extremely lax guidelines around what compounding pharmacies had to do to make sure things were sterile and where they were getting their substances from and all of this. And since then, they've made it a lot harder. And there are now compounding pharmacies that are, I mean, they do a lot of compounding for ICU care, right? To do custom preparations for IV medications. There is very much I think there's a very interesting set of patent case law around this, which is basically that if a medication is on brand and on label, you cannot make an exact copy of the medication through compounding. But You can buy it. You can buy the bulk drug product from a US-based manufacturer. You can make almost the exact same medication. So you can do very, very slight dosage changes to bypass the patent with the exact same other ingredients using all US-based manufacturing. And you can also do a slight difference. So you can add some things like vitamin B6, B12, anything like that. That's basically what legitimate compounding pharmacies are doing right now, is that they're able to buy bulk drug product from a Pennsylvania-based facility or North Carolina-based facility, and then mix it with one or two, either do the different dosing or mix it with vitamin B6 or B12 to bypass the patent. The guidance that's been issued from North Carolina and Mississippi and from some of these other states is very much going after all of the pharmacies that are using research use chemical or asking people to reconstitute their own peptide, which is an extremely sketchy way to go, because reconstituting is buying powder, is buying research use powder, mixing it up yourself with sterile water, and then injecting it. And so there's no sterility with any of that. Research use chemicals, of course. Oh, this is my kitten.
Hey, hey, kitty.
Yeah. Research use chemical is it's just not tested for human use. There's no beyond use state testing. There's nothing that's been done to check that it's going to be legitimate or have the same effect in your body. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
the FDA does also have like a lot of very interesting guidance around how compounding pharmacies are supposed to exist. What is the research they're supposed to be doing to make sure that's the same product? What is the testing they have to submit to? All the regulations that they have to do to exist as a pharmacy. I just think that there's good actors in the space and there's bad actors in the space, and differentiating these has become patient responsibility, which is the scary part, which is that you're leaving it up to patients to say, like, find your own compounding pharmacy and do your own cost differentiating and all of that.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of like with the changes that are coming, with people saying, oh, well, there were laws during COVID where it like opened up a lot more things for compound in general. Now that's going to change. So what will patients that are using a compound now, right? Like what should they be looking for to see if this is something you should continue or if they should go and look somewhere else?
Like if they're seeing a sketchy pharmacy or not.
Yeah, like how do they know if it's sketchy?
Yeah. I mean, if if it says research use, that's an obvious red flag.
Well, yeah.
If the pharmacy that you're ordering from is, I guess the biggest things is research use, and if it has anything to do with reconstituting your own peptide, that's extremely sketchy, and it's very likely that you're getting something that's not a legitimate product. As far as differentiating between like multiple different vials, it's pretty hard for patients to be able to do. So
so some of these pharmacies that are saying like they're not going to carry semaglutide anymore after a certain date, and they're saying, oh, come now and we'll give you 3 months supply because that way you'll be prepared because we won't sell anymore. What is making them say that they're not going to sell it anymore? Like,
so if you're making the exact duplicate of an on-patent product,
they're doing the exact
you will get somebody will come after you for patent infringement.
Because it's exact duplicates.
Because it's an exact duplicate.
Okay.
Also, I think that's a money grab. My personal sense on that is I think that's a money grab to try to like fear monger around this North Carolina, Mississippi stuff.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, money grab. Yeah, I can see that.
Is it more of and I think, and I'm not sure if it's just the algorithm, but if you go onto Instagram or when you go to Google, I know I start seeing so many ads for semaglutide from like wellness clinics or weight loss spas and things like that. What is your
Oh, you're cutting out.
You're frozen, Janine. We're just gonna move forward until she comes back. It happens sometimes.
Sorry, Janine.
You're back.
There you are. Hey there.
Sorry, you froze for a second.
What is take it over.
You were posing.
You were just posing. Can you hear us? This happens every episode. Somebody
This is
has
awesome.
something.
Okay. I think she's in
Okay.
process. I don't want to
Yeah.
take your question from you. She was asking about like what other GLP-1s are coming and when
Yeah.
coming down
Yeah.
the
If you could
pipeline.
tell us like some others that are like in, in studies and that would be
Yeah, there's a ton that are in studies. I think the general of like the large pharmaceutical companies that are trying to get in the obesity medicine space, there are 4 mechanisms that they're going for. Different types of GLP-1s, meaning that like we know that GLP-1 works. We know that's a naturally produced hormone. We know that if you could give GLP-1 to people, it does work. How can you basically make it last longer in your body is the whole game. So with Ozempic and Wegovy, changing up the side chain to make it last in your body for a week was a revolutionary thing compared to Saxenda, which is a daily injectable, or any of the older ones. The newer ones that are coming down the pipeline are some combination of GLP-1, GIP, glucagon receptor agonists, and amylin receptor agonists. This is kind of the 4 mechanisms that people are going for. So GLP-1s include all of the Ozempic, Wegovy, et cetera. There's cotadutide, but I think that one is going to get pulled from the market just because it works about as Saxenda. It works about as well as Saxenda, and it's not coming out for 2 years. And so I think Amgen is like, this ship's not gonna fly. There's retatrutide, which I think is the most exciting one that's coming out, which is the triple agonist from Eli Lilly, which is GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. That one has extremely good data, and that one's the only one that even 3 months after the last injection, patients still had maintained their weight loss.
Oh, wow.
Which is the newest one.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is not true for Mounjaro or for any of the other types. Usually there is some amount of regain as soon as patients come off of medication. There's one that was GIP and glucagon, so not the GLP-1. That one doesn't seem to be doing great in phase 2 trials, so I'm not sure if that one's going to make it. There's CagriSema, which is an amylin and a GLP-1 mixed together. That one is expected to go head-to-head with Mounjaro, and it's a little unclear who's going to win because it's a GLP-1 and amylin analog versus a GLP-1 GIP. And that's a trial that everybody's waiting on. And then there's Eli Lilly has its own amylin analog that's also going against cagrilinide. So cagrilinide is the one from Novo Nordisk. It's going to be mixed to make CagriSema. It's called a KBR something. It's still in phase 2 for their own amylin analog. So, yeah. Wow. And then there's the oral forms of all of this. So, the oral forms are going to be interesting just because there's just a lot of people, especially for pediatric populations, that are very needle phobic. Yeah. And so if you want to make progress in peds, this is going to be giving oral forms is going to be huge.
Yeah. 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 I think, I had kind of heard that like Rybelsus, right, which is, from what I understand, that's like Ozempic, right? But I heard that it wasn't quite as effective as it was using the injections. Is that true?
Yeah, some people say that it's not about as effective. It also has higher rates of nausea, relatively speaking. And so some people are just like, why am I doing this when I could get the injectable? So
yeah. All right. Well, gosh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were coming. This has just been fantastic. I know our audience is going to be so excited to hear this information. And it's really nice too, I think, when we can have stories and like have it validated with like science and data and like, this is real. We're not making it up, So thank you so much for providing that for us, It's really wonderful. Where can people find you and follow more about your work?
Sure. I have an Instagram, which is Join Mochi, and then I have 2 TikToks, one of which I use a lot more, which is Myra Join Mochi. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Awesome. And then also there's Join Mochi, your company, where if you're looking for telehealth obesity services, it's wonderful. I can say personally, I use it. I like it very much. It's nice to have the nutritionist aspect as well, and have a dietitian that like can help me think about food in a totally different way because I'm approaching a whole new relationship with it. So I really do appreciate that format that you've been a part of, creating. So I appreciate that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a great project. So
yes. Well, it's awesome. Thank you so much for coming today. And I hope you'll come on again next sometime. We'll let you know.
I really
we'll have
it.
some new things launching and good things to talk about. So It'd be great to have you back on.
Oh, I just want to say one thing before you go.
Yeah.
The TikTok that you made about the Ozempic protein cookie bites,
Oh, yeah.
and your response was,
I didn't have an appropriate
hilarious.
response
They're
because I
like,
was just watching this. Like, this doesn't make any sense. How did she? What's going on?
It's like my thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
I shot that out. That was pretty dang funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Yikes. Yeah.
Losing brain cells.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Myra.
Thank
Like, I
you.
appreciate you making
Yeah.
time for us. Have a
Have
good
a good
night
one.
and say bye to
Have a good
Kitty for
night.
us.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Night.
Goes,
Well,
oh,
that
good
was
night.
awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That was so great.
that was
Yes.
Hey,
awesome.
Rachel, are you still there?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah,
Cool,
she's
yes?
hanging out.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
awesome. Myra is like, she was one of the very first ones
Yeah.
that really let us know
Yeah, it's all your fault.
by the science, by the data, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's real.
It's real.
Whether they believe it or not, it's real. Here it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you hear when she said that all these other pharmaceutical companies are now going to start fighting to get into this space? I'm making
Yeah.
me think of
Yeah.
Kim's theories, but
Yeah.
so even though like right now we're fighting it, but these companies are starting to see, hey,
Yeah.
they have to fight to get into that space.
Yeah. Like
And
this is
hopefully that will
I
drive prices down.
I
you
think it
know.
will.
I think it
Competition
will.
usually does drive prices down because they have to come up with more. They can't just say we are, and from a marketing perspective, y'all, like you can't just say we are superior, pay us $1,000 a month,
Right.
or you have to say we are superior and we are more affordable. Like it has to, you have to have both people. The average person, if we just look at like data, right? Like if at the end of the day, the majority of people that are affected by obesity are going to be the middle and even lower class. Like it's not going to be the 1%, who are going to have money to be able to pay $1,000 to $2,000 a month for their medication. So if that's the case, then you're missing the entire base by not marketing them and not getting it to be a more affordable.
Yeah.
They've got to find a way to make that happen. And that's why they have those coupons. That's why they're getting on more formularies, but it takes time,
Yeah.
And so the problem is, but I just keep trying to think, yeah, but they're just like she said, there are more that are coming down. If anything, over the next 2 years, we're just going to have options, and so that when we have options, they have to compete for our business. So I think we'll be in a better position. But unfortunately for now, it's kind of, we just have to wait. We have to have backup plans. We have to consider if we want to like compound or not. There's so many things to think about. And just like she said, especially with like compound, like we're kind of put in a position where we have to make that choice, because there's not enough guidance. And that's a shitty position, frankly, for anybody to have to be in, and I hope that changes. I have a lot of hope because I've seen so much momentum, like even just over the past 6 months, in
Yeah, it has been a
this
lot.
space, you guys, like, and them trying to, get on Medicare and Medicaid. But here's the thing, like if they wanted to sell, if they sold it for $300, they could, like, if they really wanted to. And that's the space they wanted to get at because they knew by getting on Medicare and Medicaid, they knew that they could do that. And they knew that the commercial insurances would then follow, which we know is the trend usually, is that they set the standard, right? If they knew that, then it'd be worth it, right? It'd be worth it to sell it for $300 to have it be break even and it makes sense for the government. But I don't know if they're short-sighted or not. I don't think so. From what I've seen with Eli Lilly, they are not short-sighted. They are long game people. Like they are about the long game. So I'm going to just continue to have hope in that and stay positive because what else am I going to do?
Continue to be intrigued by Kim's hypotheses.
my
Oh,
true
good.
speculation with legitimately no education in healthcare. Anyway, well, it's been great. Thanks for coming on, Rachel. We really
Thank you,
appreciate you telling your
Rachel.
story.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. It's really awesome what you guys are doing, and the advocacy is so important. And just putting this information out there. There are people that will never be on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't know.
No.
They don't.
Especially with them threatening to take our TikTok away.
Good luck monitoring all of that. That's what I say.
I'm hoping.
We can find the YouTube comments.
Funny.
But you know what? Now we're on YouTube. Now we're on Facebook. We're on
Yeah.
Instagram. We're on all the
Everywhere.
socials. We're on all the audio podcasts. So we're getting loud, you know? That's
Can
all we
we
have.
chat? Can we chat a little bit about your Facebook page and the meal?
Oh yeah. Tell us about your Facebook page, the GLP-1 TikTok community.
So it just, the TikTok comments are limited to a certain amount of characters, and I'm really
Yeah.
long-winded, so it
Same.
just really made sense. But really, we all wanted to be able to communicate in longer form that wasn't a video on TikTok,
Yeah.
and be able to help, answer questions and help our friends and celebrate our friends. And there are people that never want to create on TikTok. They don't want to be, in a video or in a post.
Yeah.
And so those people are able to post, their success story in our Facebook group. And it's GLP-1 TikTok family or
Yep.
TikTok
Yep.
GLP-1 family, one or the other,
GLP-1 TikTok family.
right?
Yes.
That's the one.
And we all are so bonded over this outrageous, unique experience, right?
Yes.
And so we all want to meet up, and we all want to, communicate all the time. And
and we are meeting up, aren't
yeah,
we? In
yeah.
October.
It's
We're
October
making
5th
friends
through
in
the
this
8th.
community.
There's a little one in Nashville,
I'm so
which we'll see
excited.
how little it stays. I don't know.
You said October
Get a head
5th.
count.
What were the dates again?
October 5th through the 8th.
Okay.
Yes.
In Nashville, and you can pick your own,
Yeah.
where you stay, but we have good ideas too.
Yeah. It's going to be really fun. I keep thinking to myself, what are we all going to do? Because if we're not going to sit around and eat and drink, because,
Right.
We're going to talk about GLP-1 medications
and then have a taste of something because we don't want much.
Swap clothes.
and try on new clothes. I think we need to have like a
Yes.
clothing swap or something.
Oh, I love that idea.
Good idea. Clothing swap.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yes.
about
that
you.
would
I
be
still
cool.
have my Vino on my Mounjaro. I hit a wall quicker than I used to, but
Yeah.
I still
Every
go to
now and
my
then.
wineries.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not like I can't. Like, that's one thing that's about great with medication. You're not limited into what you can eat or can drink. You're meant to have an inclusive life, But at the same time, it's like, I
I'm
just
not
don't
gonna have
really
2
want
bottles.
to.
Right,
I just don't
exactly.
really, that's all that it is.
And it's take it or leave it.
Yeah.
It's very
I'm cool.
I can make the decision. It's my decision.
It's my decision. And that's
The
how
pig
I
doesn't call
thought
you
about it
anymore.
too, is it's like, it's so cool to like make a decision and be okay with the consequences because I know it was mine. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it was conscious. It was clear. I did not feel controlled or steered away from something or towards something. It was like, I bit a piece of that chocolate because I freaking wanted to, and I'm all right with it. You know what I mean? But before in the past, I felt so out of control, But you know what? Now I'm just going to eat some chocolate and be okay with it because it's
Leave
okay.
the rest of it, for later.
There are no good foods or bad foods.
And so many people find success in not restricting.
Yeah.
I do.
There's so much when you restrict yourself from a whole group of food or a certain food that you love, for a lot of people, you end up just obsessing about it
Yeah.
and then over consuming.
Yes.
Binging.
That was
And
the
there's
struggle.
so much frenzied energy around food, and the diet starts tomorrow, so we need to have our food funerals tonight. Let me eat all the food because I
Food
can't have it
funeral.
again for so
Yeah.
long. And
I love
all
it.
this
Food
weird,
funeral.
I don't have that. If I want to
Yeah,
have
me neither.
pizza every single day, I will.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Yeah.
But I can.
And I will.
Right.
Because you're like you're
no
normal now.
pressure.
You don't have
Yes.
this. It's
I think this is what normal
this
quote feels like. Like I think this is it. Like, oh, like I can choose. Like all that, like it turns out like all that I've always been very driven, and so but I could never figure out my food. And so that always made me feel like a failure. But it turns out once this was removed, I was able to kind of apply how I do everything. And it's just that was the real me. It was just hidden by all that crap, and the medicine really cleared that up and provided that freedom,
It gives you the feeling of a person that does not have dysregulation of these hormones.
Exactly.
This is
100%.
a dysregulation of these hormones. There's
Yeah.
no other answer.
No.
Because
it wouldn't
otherwise the
work.
medication wouldn't work.
Yeah,
And-
exactly. Like it wouldn't work. Like if that's
Yeah.
the case. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. Well, I hope people have heard us tonight and they have, felt like they connected in some way and that they'll be afraid to not, or won't be afraid to go to their doctor or go to a doctor or look into telehealth obesity medication or practice. Like there are just so many different routes now for people to go. And I just think there are a lot of people that are alone and a lot of people that are ashamed and scared. So I'm hoping that this reaches them. We've seen some really cool comments so far about people saying they feel like it's a safe place and okay, I'm going to look into this. So it is working. So thank you for being a part of this. We
This is
really
a safe
appreciate
place.
it, Rachel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
it is a
Thank
safe place.
you.
Have a wonderful night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Mom.
Night, Rachel.
She's the best. So that was so nice, right?
That was great.
It
Yeah.
was great. Even though we lost our Janine for a little bit, she was here for most of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Wi-Fi
technology.
just like
You know,
wasn't
technology.
loyal.
Technology.
It
Yeah.
just is what it is. Anyway, well, let's do our classic sign-offs. So I kind of already started mine, is that the whole purpose of this is that I want you to know you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be alone, and that there are solutions out there for you. And I'm always going to end with hasta la pasta. Kat, what's your classic sign-off?
Always Katharine Hepburn. Always be yourself. Never quit. And don't put too much flour in your
Your
brownies.
brownies.
Awesome. What about you,
Your
Janine?
brownies. I always say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
It is a marathon. So be in it, be consistent, be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure. Like, especially if you're starting one of these medicines, like, just know, like, it's not a quick fix. Like, no matter
No.
what people try to say, it's not. Yeah.
No.
Especially all these
Exactly.
shortages and everything. It's definitely a
Yeah.
marathon.
Definitely a marathon.
Look,
Roll with the punches.
Yes.
do not even talk about that. I actually had my first encounter with shortages this
Ooh.
weekend. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Welcome. Welcome,
Yeah.
Janine.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Just
you.
hang on. It'll come.
Hang in there.
Don't stress out. Don't worry about it. It'll
It'll
be
work
there.
out. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, it's gonna
Well,
work. It'll work out. The biggest reason I think when I ever hear go to shortage, I'm like, it's going to work out because there's way too many millions and billions of dollars to be made by people that
Left
want
on
to
the
stay
table.
millionaires and
You're right.
billionaires.
Mhm.
They will make it happen. It may take a minute,
Yeah.
but it'll get there. And I just trust capitalism and greed. I'm usually okay in this instance. Yeah.
True indeed.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you next week, and we hope that this was a good episode for you.
Woo.
Bye.
thank
Bye,
you.
friends.
Bye.